Advance Wars, one of the classic turn-based strategy game for the Game Boy Advance that has received a ton of critical praises of it before. It's not much of a surprise considering how good the game can actually be, to the point it ends up receiving a remake version of it, both the first and the second Advance Wars game. However, considering it's one of my childhood favorite games, I wanted to explore of how good exactly the game can actually be. It wouldn't be just a nostalgic praising of the game, but a more accurate one to compare during its time of release. I'm also gonna be talking about the problems that comes with it. This is K1PM. Today, I'll be doing a full review of Advance Wars. I'll be talking more in depth about the game and pointing out the pros and cons of it. Advance Wars was developed by Intelligent Systems, often known for their works on these series that you might know, and was published by Nintendo themselves for the Game Boy Advance on September 10, 2001. Surprisingly, the game had its first release in North America. It never had a release in Japan due to some circumstances, but instead, they got a Game Boy Wars Advance 1 plus 2, both the first Advance Wars and the Black Hole Rising in a single game. Despite its release date, however, I did end up playing the game at an early age as a kid. Growing up playing the whole Advance Wars series was a memorable thing for me. Even their last entry on Days of Ruin, I've managed to play that too. Although the Advance Wars series wasn't exactly the first similar turn-based strategy game I've ever played before. There were quite a few similar concepts of the game other than the Super Famicom Wars. Games such as Fire Emblem, Ogre Battle, The March of the Black Queen, Super Robot Wars, and Dragonite 4. Yeah, I've played that last one before. I still even have the game with me even until now. I never knew it was a half-edgy kind of game. I just thought that the game was fun and all, back then when I was a kid. Advance Wars games, however, takes on a unique kind of approach towards the turn-based strategy game, where the goal is simple. Either defeating every enemy in the field, accomplish specific objectives within a mission, or just capture the enemy HQ. While the game has the same type of units that every player or enemy AI may have, but with different set of stats on the power and defense of a unit, depending on the commanding officer or CO in charge. Whether choosing Max for his specialty on direct combat for non-infantry units, dominating the field with its absurdly overwhelming power, at the cost of his artillery forces not being that strong, Grit for his expertise in indirect combat, raining down a barrage of artillery strikes from afar, but its weakness towards direct combat, or choosing a more balanced CO like Andy here for instance, having a more moderate power in defense of every unit, but has a unique CO special to heal or repair every unit he has up to 2 points. This ends up creating a flexible set of game style that a player might prefer on using to. Not to mention how each CO's having their own activatable CO power that can possibly change the tide of battle when used. The effects, however, varies from one CO to another, from increasing the overall power and defense of every unit for can-based troops, to Olaf's CO power of summoning the blizzard throughout the whole field, increasing the movement cost of all natural terrain, except for his own units of course, since his specialty is on the snowy weather. Not only does the game has a good touch when it comes to the variety of COs to choose from, what I also like is when it comes to the battle itself. The game has a fair amount on the type of units to have, from the 2 different infantry units to the different kinds of vehicles in the game, either providing the variety means of transportation, light vehicles and submarines acting as the recon in a fog of war battle, infantry units for capturing any kind of building, or any other units as a means of combat in defeating the enemy. There's also the importance on the supplies of ammo and fuel that's provided by an APC or from a respective building, depending on the kind of unit of course. Although the Navy side of things is a bit underwhelming, considering the high cost of naval ships and how vulnerable they are. It's not worth purchasing for in a way, unless if it's a necessary certain situation. But given a chance of recruiting a unit, I'd rather choose the land vehicle or an aircraft unit instead. What's unique in the game is the different sets of terrain available. that each land or sea unit takes advantage of, and not just the means of an obstacle. Terrain differences plays a huge role within the game. Not only does it provide a defensive cover, but it also changes the movability and vision of any land vehicle or an infantry unit. Mountains provide a huge defensive cover and vision for infantry units, but can't be traversed by any land vehicles. The same thing goes with rivers, but it provides no defensive cover at all. This what makes infantry place best in situations like these, making COs like Sammy to take advantage of her strength on infantry troops, while trees and reefs provides a decent amount of defensive boost and slowing down any land or sea vehicle movements. What makes it more appealing though is how those terrains makes an excellent cover when in a fog of war battle, making COs like Grit can highly take advantage on this kind of setup, putting a bunch of artillery units without the enemy seeing it, while striking them from afar. It's a good tactics to do in some situations. While choosing Sonya can actually see through the terrain when her CO power is activated, making Sonya a decent CO to choose from when in a fog of war battle. The concept of the terrains what makes the game challenging, as it ends up creating various kinds of strategy and situations in fighting off the enemy, especially within the campaign missions of the game. How it greatly challenges the player's situation to be adapted by different COs to choose from. It makes the single player experience a worthwhile to finish. As some parts of the campaign offers the recruiting of units through 3 different types of buildings, there are some situations during the campaign that only gives the player a set amount of units to handle, fighting against an uneven battle, making most of the campaigns can be quite challenging to deal with, utilizing the remaining units that a player starts off with while carefully choosing the right units to sacrifice on the front lines, just to bait the enemy close enough for an immediate retaliation, as well as having different mission routes available. Depending on the player's decision, the scenario changes, developing an interesting set of dialogues in the game, while having a result page after each succeeding battle. The higher the rank that a player could attain, the more coins rewarded to the player to purchase on the shop, as well as increasing that player's overall ranking, for more bragging rights I guess. Although, when it comes to the story itself, it's not that good. The different available routes and the character's dialogue is actually alright, especially for a story in a strategy game, how it seems engaging in a way, but there were times that the story doesn't make any sense. Like, why would the Orange Star Army would go for Yellow Comet when they are currently on war with Blue Moon? Negotiations while bringing the whole army? Passing through another country without any permissions? What exactly are you guys trying to accomplish here for? While the Yellow Comet themselves didn't even get mad after what the Orange Star did, after losing a bunch of their men while losing a lot of their own territory. Like, why? It's painfully obvious that they didn't exactly care for the minor details of the plot, just adding an evil Andy clone while having an evil army to take control of everything. It's kinda a shame how it ends up becoming like this, considering the start of the story was actually decent. While the final battle against Sturm in the end was a really challenging foe to deal with. Depending on the previous decisions that a player makes, changes the 2 COs available on the final battle. It kinda feels a bit of a bad idea in my opinion. They could have at least let the player freely choose instead. But anyway, having to control 3 different COs while battling Sturm is no joke. It even took me like around 4 hours of non-stop retries of the battle, just to get that rank S in the mission in under day 9. And I haven't talked about the advanced campaign yet. It's a much more harder new game plus. If you're wondering how I end up winning that match real fast in under 9 days, it's because how the enemy AI of the game is a bit flawed in a way. Overall though, the AI is actually alright in most cases, but there were times when the AI it just feels like a mess. Like here in Mission 3, placing the copter beside an enemy anti-air vehicle, there's no point in doing it. I understand if the enemy got baited on attacking a certain unit, but moving it here just doesn't make sense. It's just like the enemy purposely tries to lose the game. Or how this situation ends up confusing me. Not one unit actually ends up attacking my infantry, who's capturing an airport, The enemy would even go so far as putting an infantry beside it without even trying to attack it. Even though the CO is Kanbei himself, it's as if the enemy AI wouldn't take the advantage of the situation. Not only that, I'm not even quite sure why they're even obsessed attacking a transportation unit. Like on this situation ends up using 3 of Sturm's unit just to attack my damaged transport copter who's not carrying any units, instead of attacking these vehicles that are highly more important. I could go on and on with these kind of situations I've encountered, but I think you get the idea. The game's AI isn't exactly that perfect, and for a strategy game, that's actually a crucial thing they should have worked on. Aside from that problems is the noticeable balance issues of the game. I love the variety of COs available for the game, that each COs has their own sets of unique specialization in the field. But there were some COs in the game that have a clear unbalanced issues, namely Max and Sonya. Max has a ridiculous amount of 150% power for all non-infantry units, and that's not even a CO power yet. He easily became the most broken CO in the first Advance Wars game. Like, sure, he does have a weaker indirect combat units, making them somewhat a bit useless in combat. But when it comes to direct combat power, not even Eagle's Air Force or even Sturm's army can match Max's 150% power. That's just absurdly too high. There's also the problem with Sonya's weakness. Personally, she's actually one of my personal favorites when it comes to the fog of war battle, prioritizing more on the tactics of visibility in the field, while hiding every of her unit's HP from the enemy. Although her weakness on the other hand involves having a bad luck in the battlefield, as in there's a chance of damaging the enemy at a much lower damage compared to the expected output. The chances of it happening is actually around 50.56%. In fraction, that's about 91 out of 180 that the bad luck occurred, which is actually really high. I honestly didn't think that it would be this high while I'm doing the script. I ended up testing it out on this map that I created for about 10 times in a row, just to be sure I'm on the right track. I know that there's a much more in-depth discussion on the luck system of the game. The testing ground I did here is just a minor scale of it for Sonya's case. The balancing issues with the other COs are pretty much alright, like the case with Nell and Sturm, who are a bit stronger as compared to the other COs, considering they are more of a secret unlockable COs in the game. It's more of a mini fun mode when using them at times. But it's kinda sad how Sturm is a bit nerfed down on the versus mode of the game. It would have been interesting to fight against a friend who's using Sturm against a different CO. The multiplayer setting, however, is actually a decent one to have. It can be played by in a 4-player battle, as well as having an adjustable rule setting with a wide range of maps available to choose from, while being able to create your very own map to fight against enemy AI or against other human opponents like your friends. Although not every COs are available immediately, the COs can be unlocked through buying them here at the shop, or doing specific conditions such as completing the campaign mode. But in order to make them available in the shop, specific chosen characters in a mission must be selected. To which, it kind of feels a bit too much having to repeat the whole campaign again. Guessing which missions unlocks the CO can be troubling without a guide. When it comes to the art design, however, Advance Wars does a pretty good job at it considering a game made for the Game Boy Advance. It might look cartoony in a way, but it looks really well in the game. How each of the characters are designed well, along with their animated portraits in the battle. Despite the game having the same set amount of units could have, they took the time of designing the differences of each unit and building HQ depending on the faction, such as the battlecopters of Green Earth. Looks a lot like Russian Mi-24 Hind, while Orange Starside looks like an AH-64 Apache. I really love the small details they added for every unit in the game, and not just a color reskin of a unit. It makes it more enjoyable to watch seeing these battles carry out. And if you got bored of it, there's an option that you could disable it at least. Good thing the devs really thought about it. Now the soundtracks within the game is actually decent to listen on. having each of the characters' own theme plays out really well within each of the battle. A bit simple in a way, but it works quite well as a GBA game. Not to mention how catchy it is when listening to their theme. That's why I give this game a rating of 8.4 out of 10. The looks may be deceiving, especially for a strategy game on the Game Boy Advance console, but the game itself is actually surprisingly great. I speak as a person who played a bunch of strategy games in the past, both on the PC and console before. Advance Wars, however, despite its simplicity, is one of the great ones I've ever played back then. Unfortunately, it's not that well polished, considering there were a few problems with the game. A lot of it were fixed, however, on their next series in Black Hole Rising, especially the balancing issues with Max. That 50% more power is just absurdly too high. Now, would I recommend you on playing the game, however? I suggest just go for the Black Hole Rising or Dual Strike instead. The sequels are much more better compared to the first one. The upcoming Reboot Edition, however, that's actually a positive thing to look out for. Hopefully, the new developers in charge wouldn't mess this up. For more videos such as these, why not head down to my channel to check things out? I do accurate game reviews of the past games, and some other new ones too. If you want to support my channel, a subscribe would be nice. It kinda helps me out morally, to be honest. This is K1PM, and I bid you farewell.